And we're rolling. Turn off original sound. Cool. Welcome back to the New England Take on WKXL 1450 AM, 103.9 FM, and NHTalkRadio.com. You can subscribe to the show on Patreon by going to thenewenglandtake.com and subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform, including Apple, Google, and Spotify. It's all listed as the New England Take on all those platforms. Excited to see you on those, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. I am joined by the first guest of the show, Marty England of the Continuum Arts Collective and the Reconstructed and 15 million other things, I'd imagine. So I'm really excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, AJ. Very excited to be here.
So where are you based out of?
We are in a tiny town in southwestern Maine called North Berwick. North Berwick is named or is known for Pratt and Whitney, who make like jet engines, and Hussey's Seating, who make like all the bleachers for every stadium in the world.
Hussey's. That's a name. I'm from
Hussey's.
Central Maine, so I'm used to the Hussey's General Store,
Oh
weddings,
yeah.
dresses, and shotguns, or something to that effect, and beer.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
right on the sign. It's
I
a
know
hilarious
that.
place to go
Yes.
to. So the Continuum Arts Collective. What exactly does this group do?
Continuum Arts Collective assists underserved school-aged artists and musicians in Maine and New Hampshire. So what we do is we provide students with musical instruments, art supplies, we pay for their art and music lessons. We also provide them with experiential opportunities to kind of learn and grow as creators. That's been exponentially harder during COVID-19 because we can't do any in-person stuff. But yeah, so we're 100% volunteer driven. And in a nutshell, what I love about CAC is that I was one of the kids that we help. You know, when I was a teenager, um, my parents were just the type of people like my parents weren't super poor or anything like that, but they definitely, I mean, I've literally had a job since I was 5 because you just had to, if you wanted something when you were a kid, you had to work. So I had paper routes. But the other part of support isn't just materials, it's having the support of having your parents get behind your dreams and be like, hey, this matters or this is important, you know? For me, I definitely grew up in a house that um, I was not appreciated on that level. And I'm not like, you know, it's not a pity party or anything. I think most people's parents that I know that are artists and musicians that come from working class families, they definitely were misunderstood as teenagers because their parents weren't allowed to dream themselves. So,
Yeah, they didn't have that experience. I mean, you turn 18, you're gonna go. Especially you see that a lot in Maine, especially. I mean, the
oh,
the
yeah,
the income levels are not very high with the majority of the population. So I mean, you get 18, you get out of high school. If you're lucky, you go to the tech. If you're
yeah,
not lucky, you're working.
that's exactly right. And it was, but you know, some of the things I did take from my folks is that my dad was a cop in a small town. I actually grew up in southern New Hampshire in a tiny town called Rollinsford. My mom always took care of the elderly. And my dad used to have a basic saying that if you take care of your community, the rest takes care of itself. And so I think one of the lessons that I did learn from my folks is that it's important. Community is extremely important. And however you can plug yourself into that, whether it's just volunteering or whether it's starting a, you know, working class arts organization like we did, I do think that that's definitely a takeaway. It's definitely they didn't teach me how to write songs or you know do anything else, but they definitely taught me how to serve others.
Yeah, it's community for sure is up there. It's for me. It's like I was in scouts at my church. And I actually got into music when I was in in middle school also. So that was big. Like that was my whole world at the time. So that's big. Now something people don't realize with all this stuff is it's really expensive
Yes.
for art. You gotta have supplies, and you're gonna use them up. They're products they will be used, and eventually they're not going to be able to be used anymore. And on the music side, instruments are crazy expensive. Most students either rent or they're getting some secondhand instrument that hopefully it's in decent condition,
Yeah.
varying states. It's like I was very lucky in high school where the school had some instruments I was able to use. And can you talk about some of that?
Yeah, we definitely started off. Um, this was our fifth. We had our fifth anniversary in February, and we definitely started off mostly taking in donations, fixing those instruments up. Mostly it was instruments. We did not have the money to just go out and buy kids what they wanted. Um, and that is it's fantastic. That I mean, it's great that people are willing. I always call it the guitar of good intention, right? So like people will turn 40 and they'll be like, I'm going to learn guitar, and they have no idea what they're in for, because you're supposed to start. I mean, that's we just try to get younger and younger and younger with the kids that we help, because if you can start by the time you're 10, you're going to be in fantastic shape by
Yeah.
the time you get out of high school. If you try to start when you're 40, your brain's just it's I hate to say it, but it's going to be a long, hard road. So we get a
Yeah.
lot of instruments that, like, the wife bought, her husband a guitar for Christmas, and then we end up with it. And it's been, I have to honestly say, I did not play brass or wind instrument in high school. I played guitar since I was 11. I've been writing songs since I was 11, because I didn't learn how to read sheet music, so I had to kind of make up my own songs. um, but I had no idea how expensive it was to not only purchase a brass or wind instrument, but to maintain it, because we get a lot of donations. If people are like, "Hey, my daughter, had this saxophone, and we want to give it to you," I'd be like, "Great," and then I'll bring it to the shop, and they'd be like, "It's like $700 to like repair it." So
Yeah.
yes, it's cost prohibitive, and it's like, we've served. I think we just on the art supply side, it's always been new stuff. We've always had kids that have applied. Um, we've started off just buying them new stuff, because you can't really give somebody, unless it's like an easel or something, you can't really give somebody used art supplies.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been we still take donations. Thankfully, what we've been able to do now is a lot of donations that we get, especially weird stuff. And I say weird stuff, we get some weird stuff like Celtic harps and like accordions and just stuff kids are never going to apply for. And what we do a lot of times now is we will have, well, we haven't been able to do this for over a year, but we will have like quarterly barn sales where people come in, they'll just buy up our used stuff, and we just seed our instrument fund with the money. And then I'm able to standardize. By doing that, I'm able to like standardize warranties and stuff like that, and buy all the kids the same instruments.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. I mean, I my first few instruments I did were I was a saxophone and clarinet. There's a lot of little parts, and if one of
Mm-hmm.
those little screws goes, the whole instrument doesn't work, and you can't play in a group as a kid if a couple of the notes don't work because you're going to mess up the entire performance. And it's super embarrassing.
It is. And one of the things we kind of realized during this is that there's kids always just rent an instrument. Um, and at the end of the day, what I think is interesting is people always kind of confuse us with like some type of talent agency or something. Like we're looking to make these kids stars. And what we know about art and music is that and you know this because you play music, it's like they allow you to make connections within yourself and with other people. There is no other endeavor that really allows you to do that than art or music. And if these kids play after they get out of high school, fantastic. If they don't, that's fine. It helped them get through a part of their life that they would have otherwise had. I mean, I had a really hard time in adolescence myself. And music, I mean, everybody always thinks it's dramatic when you say, well, music saved my life. I really think in a lot of ways it did. It helped me realize who I was, helped me realize I'm a creative guy. And, I think for a lot of these kids, the kids that we serve, they're typically rurally isolated. They live at or below the poverty level. And you've lived in rural Maine, so you know what this is like. And it's basically, we're kind of, a lot of times when we introduce a kid to something, they will they'll get into it, and then they realize, like, hey, actually, I know I said I wanted to do watercolors, but I just saw my friend playing with this beats program, and I think I want to be a DJ. It'd be like, awesome, great, no harm, no foul. Let's get you into that, you know. And it's I think for these kids that, first of all, I did not know. My wife runs a program at Noble High School here in North Berwick. It's called Multiple Pathways, and we majority of the kids that we've served up until a couple of years ago, they all came out of her program. And Noble High School was fantastic in that they really embraced Continuum Arts Collective. They embraced what we did. They let us into their school, um, and we were able to put our own instructor in there who was teaching like bass guitar, ukulele. He'd teach like 60, 70 kids a year. Um, these kids really needed that. And we were, when COVID hit, it was interesting because the principal came to us like a year ago and said, hey guys, I hate to tell you this, but in the fall we can't have your instructor come back into school unless the pandemic ends, you know. So we we had to move away from that, and we ended up making a partnership with Portsmouth Music and Art Center, which has actually been extremely advantageous because now we can offer these kids all these different disciplines that we didn't before. If I had like a request for, like, student would apply and they would be like, hey, I want piano lessons, I would have to go find a piano teacher for them. I would have to establish a relationship with that teacher. And now with online, it's like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is what we try to do is remove barriers for these kids. One of the biggest barriers in where we live is transportation.
Definitely.
Um, driver's ed now costs $550 a year. And a lot of their parents, they just don't have the support from their parents to like necessarily drive them to lessons. A lot of the jobs they could get, they're like adults working those jobs. Like they're working at Cumbies, at Subway, places, the Roma Joe's. Um, so they're kind of like stuck in the weeds. And it's, you know, it's for us, it's just nice to be able to remove some barriers for some people that looked a lot like we did when we were that age.
Yeah, it's kind of it's really interesting what COVID has done with regards to the arts and how musicians have rethought what they do and what being a musician in 2020 and 2021 looks like. I mean, I produce Granite State of Mind with Rob Azevedo. Definitely, everyone, please follow that show. It's fantastic. He's no longer on KXL, but he's still broadcasting out of Manchester. But so many musicians like, okay, we're just gonna do live streams. We're gonna put a tip hat out where there's all their Venmo and PayPal links and all that, and say, hey, you're getting some free music. Support if you can, on Facebook and things like that. Others went the YouTube route and figured out ways to monetize it. I could speak to his Mr. Aaron, who's a kids musician based out of Concord. And he figured out doing like a Patreon sort of format where families would pay, and anyone that was in the room could have music class for preschool to first grade or something like that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's interesting. I think where it seems like, you know, where things break down, there's always an opportunity, right? And, you know, I always say, and I think, I mean, you and I may even talked about this at work, but it's basically like, if this had happened 20 years ago,
yeah, it would have been it would have been so bad.
Catastrophe. I mean, think about like 1918 when the Spanish flu happened. It was like, I can't even imagine trying to live through that time.
I can't imagine doing any of my music stuff 20 years ago.
No, it's like true.
Like I picked up, like, yeah, I started like clarinet and saxophone was interesting. It was cool to get started, but I dug electronic music production and radio and electric guitar and bass and stuff like that, and that's where I really found the like continuing interest after education. Because I think it's super important. I think having that music in your life is it wires your brain differently. If you get into it when you're young, the being able to just figure it out on the fly, like I got to learn how to work with a bunch of other kids, like through like I did jazz extensively, playing tenor saxophone. I'm like, you need to learn how to work with other people. You don't get to run the show the whole time. You get to run the show sometimes. What I liked about jazz, you get to still take the lead sometimes, but it's teamwork.
It is. Yeah, and jazz is an art form unto itself. It's a yeah, it's I mean, I think all those things you talk about there, it's like music. One of the things that we always try to share with our kids is that, I've done a U.S. tour before. I've been out on the road. I've been gigging since I was 14 years old, and I played like my first gig, which was like in a double wide trailer in Wells, Maine. And they'll be like, they always think they have this approach where they have to go for it somehow. It's like, that's cool. Art and music don't have to be an all or nothing endeavor. But here's the critical piece is that if you look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, and you want to reach self-actualization, if you are an artist or musician and you're depriving yourself of art and music, you can never be self-actualized. You can never be your best self. And so what I try to say is like, listen, you don't have to go on the road. But man, it feels so good to jam with other people. It doesn't matter what the venue is. It could be in your living room. It feels good for me to sit here in my chair and write songs and have my dogs at my feet. It brings you a sense of inner peace and purpose that just I think a lot of people miss out on.
Yeah, and self confidence too, for sure. I mean, I was uh, definitely a super quiet kid until I got
Mm-hmm.
into it, and it
Me too.
taught me to be able to step out a lot more and be like I'm doing this. Like this isn't something that would have even crossed my mind when I was in high school. But I got confidence to be able to get in front of people and talk or play or do anything like that. It really I really think it rewires your brain and how you work. Um, so I want to be able to leave enough time to also talk about your personal music experience. But before we do, like, how do people? Do you have any success stories for the collective?
Yeah, I mean, um we have a ton of success stories. We've served over 600 students now in the 5 years we've existed. One of the things we've done during COVID, which has been really helpful to local school districts, is we've been putting together these art kits. We call them art survival kits, distribute them to elementary schools. And I think one of the important things, going back to like getting into it when you're young, the funny thing is like I feel like especially with art, people get especially self-conscious if they don't, like when you're a kid, you're just like just like throwing stuff on the paper, and it's so you don't realize that tactile experience just really helps you cope with a lot of stuff. And so we started, Jenny had a student in 2015, I believe. This is before we actually established ourselves. He needed a guitar. We host this annual event, um, where every year we had a different benefactor, just private gathering. For many years, we just gave the money to local farmers markets so they could book music. And it just wasn't going well. Like people in our town just didn't really care that there was like Tristan Oman's playing a set in front of the North Berwick Town Hall. People just didn't appreciate it.
Yeah.
So that particular year, we decided to move away from that. We didn't have a benefactor. And Jenny came up and said, "Hey, listen, I got this kid. He's way into music. He's writing his own songs. He's borrowing his friend's guitar, and his friend's going to college. And this kid is definitely underserved." So she's like, "Can we take $500 from our event and buy him a guitar?" I said, "We can do that." I said, "I have three beautiful acoustic guitars. I can't play them all." And the older I get, I'm just kind of like minimizing and just realizing I'm not a guitar collector, I'm a guitar player. And so I gave him my first Taylor guitar, and the kid was like over the moon.
I
And
bet.
that day, I was driving to UNH, um, to go to work after I gave him the guitar, and I was like, here's what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. We're going to help kids because we don't have kids of our own. And we've always thought about what are we going to do to like help other people. We bought this farmhouse in 2003. We have a barn, and we've always hosted community events for our friends and neighbors. We help feed people. Sorry, my dog is. Hey. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Someone
Joy's at home.
So yeah, I think a lot of our success stories are, especially during COVID. Like now, we are just serving more kids than ever. Even though it sounds like it wouldn't be possible, we're starting to reach into Portland, Maine. We're starting to reach we're starting to reach in areas we hadn't before because people need that help. One of the things we try to do is establish some type of liaison in the community that we're serving, just so that they can kind of act as a conduit with the student. Do you know where Bristol, New Hampshire is?
Yes. Yeah.
So
one of our central. Yep.
Yeah, one of our board members comes from that town. One of his best friends just moved back there, and they cut the arts and music program.
Oh.
And we haven't done a lot in New Hampshire. What we have done has always been pretty substantial. I bought a kid from Somersworth, super nice precision bass. He's majoring in music at Southern Maine College, Southern Maine University, and University of Southern Maine. Anyways, we sent this kid through this marching band. We gave him money to go on tour with this marching band across North America. Came back, we started giving him, he plays bass and drums. So I gave him a drum kit. So give him like a 6-string bass he could just, wail on. And then when he was leaving for college, I was like, hey man, what are you playing for bass? And he's like, well, I got a Fender Squier. I'm like, go to the Fender shop right now and tell me what you want. So like Bristol is we happen to have a liaison there now, and even though it's not I've heard from a couple of foundations that we should just try to focus on like a 30-mile radius, and that's cool. But what I'm interested in doing is having that liaison in place. So now we've got a guy in place. We're meeting next week. I'm getting ahead of myself with that because I don't know how it's gonna go, but I know
You're excited.
Remember, yeah,
it's exciting.
And it's the type of town that we serve, and this guy is excited to work with us. So I feel like in New Hampshire we haven't had that big splash yet in that one community that we can just really, because most of our board members live in Maine, and a lot of our board members are teachers, so they have a direct connection with their school. They're able to contact art and music teachers, even the school nurse. A lot of times the school nurses. So yeah. So
school nurse will actually reply to the email. The music teacher,
yeah, right. That's right. That is very true. Or the administrative assistant.
Yes, the secretary in the office or the nurse. Those are the two that'll reply to the email.
So if you're listening to this, if you are a student, or more likely if you are a parent of a student who needs assistance in the way of musical instruments, art supplies, art and music instruction, you can go to continuumarts.org/apply, fill out an application, and I review all those personally. So
you're a 501c3 too, right?
We are 501c3, 100% volunteer driven.
That's amazing. I definitely want people. I will put a link in the episode description when I post the episode too. I'll link to everything. So definitely be sure to go to, if you can't remember that, go to New England Take on Facebook or Twitter, and I'll put it in the episode description of the podcast too, because I think this is super important. The arts definitely need to be supported, especially through all this. It's like the perfect opportunity for some kids to be able to, if they have an instrument, they're sitting around at home, they can't go off with their friends, they need to get off the darn computer screen for 5 minutes to do something else. It's fantastic for that.
That's interesting that you said the thing about the screens, because one of the things that we've realized, Jenny and I go down to Newport Folk Festival every year, and we first started going like 12 years ago. We started to realize, like, you would see people like Gregory Alan Isaacoff, right? So he was discovered busking on the streets of Boulder. He's not a poor guy, but he's not a rich guy. He self-made guy. And now you're slowly seeing all those bands get replaced for all these trust fund kids who they rich kids are not looking at screens, you know. They're not looking at screens because their parents have them involved in everything. And those are the people that are taking away, you know, with all due respect, it's like they're taking away what was once, you know, belonged to the working class. And that's what we pride ourselves on, as being a working class arts organization.
I love that. So I'll definitely link to everything on there. Please support these guys. The arts are very important, and we need to, even through everything else that's going on, it's important to the development of future generations. There's no way around that. Do you have a few more minutes so you can stick around?
Absolutely.
So here's what we're going to do. So this episode's going to broadcast with all this. We're going to go Patreon only for a few more minutes here. We're going to talk about Marty's musical journey and the Reconstructed. And you can check that out if you go to thenewenglandtake.com. $3 a month. You can get, I'm going to fill up more time than 45 minutes a week. So definitely please go there and subscribe, and we'll keep you interested. We'll do monthly hangouts too, where we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I want to hear what everyone thinks that I did wrong. So please be sure to do that. All right.
I think you're doing a great job, dude. I just realized this is
it.
your first episode and you're crushing it. So
thank you. So Marty's kiss my ass now. So he's gonna stick around a little longer, and we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna be back with Chris Ryan, the host of New Hampshire Today, which broadcasts in the mornings on WKXL from 6 to 10, as well as he's based out of WGIR in Manchester. We're gonna talk about the future of radio. So please don't go anywhere. Don't miss that. You're listening to the New England Take on WKXL 1450 AM, 103.9, and NHTalkRadio.com. You can catch the New England Take on your favorite podcast platform, including Apple, Google, and Spotify. And we'll be right back. All right.